There's been a lot of talk about renewable energy, and I won't say his name, but a fan of ours wrote a very long email, basically, frankly, just criticizing my view that renewable energy over the short to medium term would, is basically BS. And cannot meet the storage, and cannot meet the energy needs of North America's growing power consumption. Can you explain if I'm wrong, if I'm right? Is the focus on wind appropriate? Does it lack the nuance? I've made a mistake with my previous question. What's going on there? And is it as great as everybody basically keeps telling us?
At the risk of triggering a similar long letter into our inbox, wind and solar are fantasies. The crippling attribute that is always either papered over or frankly lied about is the fact that they're not dispatchable.
What does that mean?
Dispatchable means there when you need it, no matter what.
Okay. So it's the intermittency, because that's been my
intermittency is the Achilles heel, and there's no amount of storage that can save you from that. So even hydro, which actually is a giant battery, right? It's like one of the things about Quebec Hydro is that it's a giant battery. You can toggle the water levels behind the dam with very high precision to load match the needs of the grid. Even with hydro, intermittency when measured over years is such that you always go through periods of significant drought. And if your objective is 24-hour grid reliability, which is what you need for a grid to be reliable and beneficial to society, in other words, 1-2% decay in grid reliability crushes 10, 20, 30% of the value to society, right? And so take New Zealand, for example, which is heavily dependent on hydro. It's a very green grid. It went through a period of a multi-year drought. And if you don't have battery backup or natural gas backup to do that, to handle that, you have failed. And the cost of such backup scales with how little you need it, ironically.
Right.
Because that's a huge amount of capital that's not generating revenue. It's just there when you need it. So in the US, whenever you get, there's a certain maximum threshold of wind and solar penetration, after which it becomes prohibitively expensive to operate the grid. Now, the big giant lie that I'm sure people like the author of the long email that you got sent either don't understand, which I give people the benefit of the doubt, or do understand and just power through anyway, is that levelized cost of electricity, the giant sleight of hand, is that this is what consumers pay for their electricity. And levelized cost of electricity is one of the giant frauds of our generation. It's sort of the base assumption of it is that wind and solar's marginal cost is very low because the wind is free and the sun shines on its own. But making room for the intermittent nature of such electricity imposes upon the grid prohibitive costs that must be paid in order to use that electricity, but those costs are never counted in the quote-unquote cost of wind and solar.
Okay, so can you just repeat that in layman's term, really simply, so that...
All right. In order for me to make room for a wind turbine, right, sometimes that wind turbine produces a lot of electricity, and sometimes it produces none. There are times when I need a lot of electricity because the grid demands it, and the wind turbines just decide not to show up. Right. I can't really predict that over a period of more than a few days. And since my goal is 99.9% grid reliability, I need to have at the ready some form of dispatchable power to step in at a moment's notice to make up for the unexpected windfall of a still day. And the cost of that wouldn't exist if we didn't have the wind turbine, but it is never ascribed to the wind turbine.
Got it.
And so anywhere in the country, and you could just draw a curve, percent renewable integration on one axis, and final cost to the consumer of the grid, they're positively correlated. And in fact, exponentially so above 25 to 30% penetration. You reach a wall. Why do you reach a wall? It's windy all at once for all the turbines, and it's still all at once for all the turbines. So the more turbines you put onto your grid, the larger the dispatchable backup that is a money loser, that is a drag, needs to be there for you. Right? You see where this is going?
Crazy. Yeah, I know exactly where it's going. I'm just really happy you're spelling it out so well.
So yes, isolated at the turbine, it costs you nothing to produce that electricity. You pour the concrete, you put up the epoxy blades, they spin when it's windy, they don't when it isn't, and the levelized cost to the turbine is super cheap. The cost to use that electricity, which is what you and Keith and Steve pay, goes up because while the wind turbines are spinning, we are still paying the cost of capital of the natural gas peaker plant that is sitting idle. And there's no amount of batteries or natural gas plant or nuclear power plants that you can just throttle without having to pay them because they just can't be in business. So take France. 60, 70% of its electricity used to come from nuclear, and then they forced a bunch of renewables into it. What's going on? They have to throttle the nuclear power plants. The nuclear power plants don't make as much money. They squawk about it. The government has to bail them out. Worse still, the swinging on and off does damage to the plants, increases the maintenance costs, yada, yada, yada. They have to invest in new technologies to make all this work. None of those costs are ascribed into the political number, which is levelized cost of electricity.